College need to be looking for a new head coach, and what are the criteria? We got 3 or 4 things that you're going to need to know about for BC as they look for their new head coach.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and details on your Eagles, you are in the right place. Locked On BC is a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We are knee deep in coaching search discussion here, and we're going to talk about a couple new candidates. One that you're going to want to hear about that we haven't talked about here on the show that you're going to want to scream from the rooftops is a candidate you can't miss. Another secret candidate that BC I have not again brought up. And what about the criteria? I've talked a lot about the candidates. I talked about how Earl Grant didn't work, but what should they be looking for? And I brought in somebody else. We today are going to be joined by Shane McNichol of the Action Network and Palesterback website. And Shane, you're from class of 09 from BC, correct?
2013.
2013.
I arrived on campus in 2009, just after BC went to their last March Madness trip, and then of course they haven't been back since.
Well, welcome to the show, Shane. And the reason I'm bringing Shane on was Mitch Wolf noticed his Palesterback web article, Sound the Alarm, Boston College needs a men's basketball coach. Let's find one. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you need to check it out. Shane did an awesome job. And so, Shane, what does BC need to be looking for a new head coach?
Yeah, I thought it was important before you just dive into let's list candidates, which is obviously the fun part. And I've been doing that on social media for a while, but I think it's really important to look back and figure out what makes a good hire, whether it works out or not. Obviously A+ hires fail and F hires work sometimes, but it's important to look back. And I think it's important to look back, especially at the 3 hires that BC's made since firing Al Skinner, which, you look back on, was it right at the time? I don't know. But since then, they've made 3 hires. None of them have gone right. And I think you can look back and extrapolate from that what needs to happen here. So my first criteria was a track record of success over multiple years. And honestly, preferably, I'd like to see you win at multiple places. But the main thing is multiple years. And I took that as an opportunity to look back. Earl Grant was the head coach at College of Charleston for 7 years. Made the NCAA tournament once, shared the CAA title once. It wasn't even the most recent year. It's not like they got better each year through the 7. His best year was the 4th year, and then they got a little bit worse the year after that and the year after that. And then they were 500 the year that BC hired him. And to me, it did not scream like a resume that deserved a bump up to the ACC. College of Charleston spends a lot of money on their basketball program compared to the rest of the CAA. It's really a place that you should win, and he really didn't. And when they hired him, it was a cause for alarm for me. I immediately didn't like the hire, especially when Charleston went and hired Pat Kelsey. I remember that day being like, wait, could we have hired Pat Kelsey from Winthrop? I know that would have been a bigger jump, a different cultural shift, but I knew Pat Kelsey is a good coach. I wasn't sure about Earl Grant, and obviously that was the case, especially at BC. And then even you go back to Jim Christian as well. He had some good years in the MAC. He got the job at TCU and never succeeded there, even when that was a mid-major program. And then he went back to Ohio, and he had 2 middling years. They weren't. I'm not expecting him to be Cinderella who goes to the Elite 8 or whatever. But he wasn't even winning the conference. They were barely over 500 his last year there, and then he gets the job at BC. And again, it was before Grant, but you're asking yourself how could they have done this twice? And then my second criteria was experience in the modern power conference college basketball landscape. And I think that speaks a little bit to what happened with Steve Donahue. I think Steve Donahue is a good college basketball coach. I think he's doing a really good job at St. Joe's down here in my neck of the woods in Philadelphia, which he surprisingly kind of got that job after a late Billy Lang headed to the NBA in August. But I think Steve Donahue did a pretty decent job at Penn and kind of ran out of room there. And now he's at St. Joe's and is doing a pretty good job. And always at BC, I think his teams, they ran nice offense. They kind of were where they were supposed to be, but he never really got players. And this was even before NIL and transfer portal and everything. He just simply couldn't recruit to that level. I almost remember, like we said, I was on campus when Donahue was hired. I was at the introductory and a little party they had, and I remember like being excited to see who he would bring aboard, and he started bringing players from Cornell. This was pre-portal when that kind of thing didn't really happen, and it didn't feel like the right fit, and those players never really meshed into something that could win in the ACC. So now I think you're looking at, okay, we need someone who either has coached at least like the Atlantic 10, something like that, like a decent enough size conference where they have some experience with reaching out and being in the portal and building an NIL budget, or they have an assistant who did so, or an assistant who was a high major coach, that kind of thing, or maybe they were an assistant at an ACC school, a Big Ten school, a power conference school in the past. Or even played there, and somehow that feels more makes more sense to me than a coach who's kind of been a career low major, mid major coach. And then kind of jokingly, my third criteria was don't be a jackass and calling out. I know there's a lot of people who are interested in Bobby Hurley at BC, and BC basketball has been hard to watch. I think that might make it harder, not even to speak to his coaching ability. Like, I mean, if his name was Bobby Smith, would you be screaming for him? Obviously, the name is part of it, but there are plenty of big name coaches who don't end up becoming anything. Sacramento State has Mike Bibby right now. Damon Stoudemire just got fired at Georgia Tech. Like, he that's a big name. I mean, you have to remember, Bobby Hurley was great in 1992. The guys he's recruiting, at most, if they're a senior in the same transfer portal, they were born in like 2003. It's just not a name that, unless you somehow think his name comes with a bunch of donors, I don't know. And I'd be curious, where were those donors in Arizona State, because they didn't get him wins. So that was that was kind of my third throw off. But to me, the big thing is multiple years of success, and then at least a plan. If you haven't had that power conference, NIL, transfer portal success, at least a plan to show me how it's going to be. I know it's not every coach doesn't have that opportunity, but I need you to show me how you're going to do it.
So two names that have popped up I talked about, and I want to know how you would see them in this criteria. Yeah. Joe Gallo from Merrimack and James Jones from Yale. Those are two names that have popped up a lot. I see them as both of them kind of check the box for winning, right? James Jones has won a lot, which I think he doesn't get enough credit for. But it's that second box. Do you think that would be a reason to worry about either of those hires?
Yes, I do. With Jones, I mean, I liked him more 5 years ago when they hired Earl Grant. At this point, he's 62 years old. He's been in the Ivy League for multiple decades now. It just feels like a different world to jump all the way to the ACC. And I know that BC isn't spending, we're not chasing Duke. If you're listening to this and you think BC is going to be punching with Duke in North Carolina anytime soon, I think your expectations aren't realistic. But at the very least, you need to find ways to be better than Wake Forest, better than Cal and Stanford, trying your best to be better than, as good or better than Pitt and Virginia Tech. And so far, right now, James Jones's focus is being better than Harvard and Penn and Yale and Dartmouth. And it's just a little bit of a different world. I think he is a very good basketball coach. I think he really gets talent to come there, but it's such a different sell of, hey, when you graduate from here, either you're going to maybe be a professional basketball player somewhere for a little bit, but you're going to have a Yale degree. I mean, obviously we love the academics at BC, but that's not the selling point when you're looking for ACC basketball players. Gallo is so interesting because like he has had success, the same job, but both Division III and when they moved up to Division I, multiple conferences in Division I, the NEC and now the MAC. But it's a big jump. It really is. And his style of coaching worries me a little bit. They play a lot of zone. They do things that work for players at that level. Now, I will say, someone pointed this out to me recently, one of the things that you're looking for in a mid-major coach these days is, hey, we're going to hire you. You better have 2 or 3 guys that can come with you too. That happens a lot when you hire a coach these days. Joe Gallo's got some underclassmen. The MAC player of the year was I believe his name is Kavere Kennedy. He's from Philadelphia. He's a freshman. He scored 18 points a game, was the player of the year in the conference, but he's the player of the year in the conference in the MAC. Guys do go from low major to high major these days. He is only a freshman, so he's got tons of room to grow. That's a tougher sell than saying, Tony Skinn at George Mason, can you bring your 2 best players? Those guys score 15 a game in the Atlantic 10. You feel better about that. I think it's a big jump for everyone, and it's not impossible. Guys do it. Nate Oates went from Buffalo to Alabama and immediately took off. Maybe a little bit of a smaller jump, but still, jumps happen and guys do it well. I would at least feel comfortable and safe knowing when the game starts, the ball's up in the air, Joe Gallo is going to have the guys ready to play, and they're going to compete and run good offense and be ready on defense and all that stuff that at times it felt like Earl Grant's teams weren't there ready for, or, timeouts were at the wrong time. Guys were making bad plays at the ends of games, losing close games because of coaching and basketball IQ. I think Gallo could at least cover that, but that's not enough when you're talking about an ACC. So if he was the hire, I don't know, I'd be excited, but I would accept it and be ready to see how it looked.
Yeah, I think the offensive scheme too with Gallo, I think, is something that as I dive more and more with it, like his numbers are right down there with Earl in terms of offensive efficiency and things like that. So that is a piece to worry about. Like if you're looking for an offense like James Jones, you look at, I think they were like 81st or 71st in the country in scoring. Merrimack's like 350. Like they're way down there. But that's you're going to have to figure it out. Every coach, it feels like with BC, every coach you're going to probably get is going to have some warts.
I think a name that I didn't mention in my article, but someone brought up was Brian Earl from William and Mary, who was Ivy, moved up. William and Mary's in the CAA now. And to me, that's still a little bit of a jump. He hasn't had that much success yet. He's been solid, but not like making tournaments, winning conferences. And he runs a borderline, I'm not going to say gimmicky, but like they're run and run and gun and run. And I think to do that at BC is where it might feel gimmicky. Like, Texas A&M hires Bucky McMillan to run his, Bucky ball, let's go crazy. He's going to bring in the athletes. He's going to have tons of money to find the guys who can do that for him. At BC, you're trying to win with less. I think that's something that I heard you say on the show recently. You're trying to win with less, and overcommitting to a scheme like that is a big push. It could work. You could be the team that's beating people. BC's trying to win games in the 90s all the time. It's harder to see that happening in the reality of the ACC, though.
All right. Shane has some thoughts about some coaches that could be off our radar, but you need to hear about it. We're going to get into all of that in just a moment. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's moving the action. It's so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play. You decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the only old way of doing taxes, it's a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with stacks of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. If you've been thinking about joining the Everydayer Club, now is the time. Again, you get ad-free shows and access to our group chat on Discord. And if you signed up before the NCAA tournament tips off, you can get into our Everydayer Club bracket pool on Discord for a chance to win Locked On merch. It should be a lot of fun. Right now, you can use code MARCH to get your first month. Again, code MARCH. All you need to do is go to... I always forget my code, but I'm going to get it right now. LockedOnBostonCollege.supercast.com. Again, it's LockedOnBostonCollege.supercast.com. Hopefully, I will see all of you over there. See if you can beat me. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. Thank you all who made Locked On Boston College part of your first listen. And we are joined by Shane McNichol of the Action Network. We're talking about BC's coaching search. And Shane had a lot of coaches that I think we've heard a lot about But one of the names that you brought up was your secret candidate to watch. And I love this name, and I want to talk more about it. So who was your secret candidate to watch, Shane?
First one was Porter Moser at Oklahoma. And you might think no one's going to leave an SEC job for BC. Why would that happen? I think it speaks a little bit. I think BC fans can take a page out of the football book, which is Jeff Hafley kind of saw the writing on the wall and took a different job. He took a defensive coordinator job in the NFL, beat the posse out of town, as people like to say. We don't know that Jeff Hafley would have gotten fired the next offseason, but he was certainly coaching with his job on the line. And Porter Moser might be doing that as well. Now, there's also a chance Porter Moser gets fired in the next week or so. He has made just one NCAA tournament in 5 years at Oklahoma. People might start looking around and thinking about his fit there. But I think he fits a lot better at a school like BC. I mean, he did so well at another Jesuit institution, Loyola Chicago, a little bit of a lower level, but he got those teams playing so well, way beyond their talent. And again, that's what we're talking about. Can you get guys to play beyond their talent? Like if you were picking those Loyola Chicago games when they beat Illinois in the NCAA tournament, if you were lining up the guys on those teams, you're not picking that big Cam Krutwig, who was his center who weighed 280 pounds. You weren't picking him first anytime, but he was one of the best defensive players in the country because Porter Moser coached him through it. So I believe that he is the kind of person who can elevate. Now, why hasn't that happened at Oklahoma? I'm not sure. Some of it's just maybe the level of competition at the SEC, which is at this point a step above the ACC. Absolutely. The ACC has Duke and Carolina, but that next tier is not what it once was. And we've seen that over the last couple of years. So maybe he could coach the talent level at BC to that middle or top middle of the pack in the current ACC. It's certainly possible. And I think he's a name that you've heard bandied around a little bit. When Chris Holtmann took DePaul last year, because DePaul's down the road from Loyola Chicago, people thought it's not working out in Norman. Maybe he heads back to Chicago. I know he was even a name that people potentially thought Villanova might be interested in for somewhat similar reasons. Now, they ended up getting Kevin Willard off of the Sweet 16 rounds. But if that hadn't happened, Moser was a person that a lot of people thought could get that job. So I certainly think that he would be a good fit at BC. And I at the very least, again, back to what I said about Gallo, I know when I turn on a BC game and I'm going to watch 40 minutes of basketball, they're going to make a lot of the right plays. They might not win the game, but I'm going to feel better about that team than a lot of other coaches.
And you mentioned too, I think it was like the lights aren't as bright at BC, obviously. Like you're playing at Conti Forum. Yeah. And, obviously you can get the excitement back. I've said it before in the show. Like I was there when that place was packed all the time. It was a different beast. But right now there's no expectations. Like just getting the program back up, you can mold the program any way you want, kind of like what you did at Loyola Chicago. Like there's a lot of flexibility. He would have to work with a lot less, but he did that at Loyola Chicago too. So maybe he's the right kind of fit right there.
Yeah, I mean, to the expectations point, if you go a year where you don't lose to another team in New England, basically in the non-conference, and then in the ACC go like, almost 500, you do that 2 or 3 years in a row, you're at least back to respectability levels. And then you can start thinking about building what comes next. Like I said, to get to the middle of the pack in the ACC and above. But for now, that's the bar.
One name I haven't brought up, and you mentioned him in the first segment, I want to bring him back up, is Tony Skinn at George Mason. Tell me a little bit about him, because I don't honestly know all that much about him.
Yeah, he's someone I think is really interesting. He's been the head coach at George Mason for 3 years now. They are the second best team in the Atlantic 10 this year. They've won 20 games all 3 years he's been there. Haven't been in the tournament yet, which I do think, and I said this either in his section of that article or someone else's, like, I almost think that's where BC is. Like, you're buying candidates before they're the hot name. You're not getting the Cinderella team that's going to Sweet 16, which Tony Skinn could be. George Mason looks like they're going to get in, or at least have a real shot at the auto bid in the A10. But it does feel like before those candidates become the hot name, BC might be able to find someone that's interesting. But he's also been an assistant coach at Seton Hall, at Ohio State, at Maryland. He was certainly probably in the running at Virginia last year, down the road from George Mason, or Maryland as well, before they went with Buzz Williams. He also has Lewis Hinnant, who is a BC 4-year starter at BC as an assistant right now. That kind of speaks to the knowing the landscape. I think Tony knows the NIL and the portal from his time as a Maryland assistant, now in the A10, which is a high enough conference that he's dealing with that kind of stuff. And he's got a BC guy on the staff. honestly, the more I learn about him, the more I think he's a really, really strong candidate.
Yeah, I mean, you just sold me right there,
Yeah.
Shane. Like, it just seemed like what you just said, especially the Hinnett piece, because I've had people say Lewis Hinnett should be the next head coach. And I'm like, he's got the same thing going on kind of that Jared Dudley has, where he hasn't been a head coach yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's the right fit. But in a moment, well, we're going to wrap things up with Shane with a name that he wants to scream from the rooftop. And this is a name I haven't heard anywhere, but Shane's going to make it make sense. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. College basketball is nonstop, big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night from early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts. There's always action on the board, and now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with the college basketball parlay profit boost. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. I love using FanDuel. It's so easy to use. It's instant payouts, and you can go safe, go bold, and ride with your team you've been following all season, unless it's Boston College because their season's over. Well, it's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome to the 5-hour energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick. And of course, it's been the same since I've started doing these. It is my favorite fruity rainbow because I love the fruity flavor. It tastes like having a shot of candy. And when I am doing late night podcasts, when I'm doing breaking news, I need a boost. I got 2 kids at home. I'm tired all the time, and 5-hour energy gives me that with no sugar. It has a lot of upcoming flavor innovations that you're going to hear more about on our show, but you need to find your favorite flavor of 5-hour energy shots available at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here, wrapping things up with Shane McNichol of the Action Network. All right, Shane, I loved your article on how you broke things down, and this one made me laugh. But you made it make sense. And this was a coach you want to scream his name from the rooftops. And many people know him, but why should he be the coach, and who is it?
Yeah, honestly, last year I suggested this name for a couple jobs as well. I mentioned Villanova, like maybe Virginia, like every job that opens up, I kind of think should be the job that he accepts and gets back into coaching, because the person I'm talking about is Tom Crean, who is on ESPN. He hasn't coached now. This will be his 4th March not being on a sideline. And that's where you're starting to stretch the believability that he wants to get back into it. But what people forget is that Tom Crean was a fantastic college basketball coach. Led Marquette to the Final Four with Dwayne Wade leading the way. Went to Indiana and got them a number 1 seed, an outright Big Ten title, 3 Sweet 16s, and they fired him for it. You know, obviously things went a little south, not that far south. Like Indiana has not since reached the heights that he took them to. They haven't been to a Sweet 16 since then. They haven't even come close. They've only have 1 winning season in the Big Ten in 9 years since firing Tom Crean. And then Tom Crean ends up at Georgia, and that's a tough place to play in an SEC that gets better and better each year. He had Anthony Edwards, an NBA star there. Now, I'm not saying he's going to start bringing top 5 recruits to BC, but he certainly knows his way around recruits. This is a guy who coached, like I said, Dwayne Wade, Victor Oladipo, Cody Zeller was a top 5 pick. People forget. I just said Anthony Edwards. So this is a guy who knows how to bring talent in and knows how to win once he has it. And at this point, I'm starting to think Tom doesn't want a job, because I feel like either I'm his agent or he's paying me under the table or something, because I keep expecting, and I think it's something you've seen some guys get back into it. Josh Pashner, I think, did a year or 2 at ESPN and now is at UNLV. Steve Ladden was on ESPN for like 10 years and then went back to San Diego and it didn't work. So it's certainly possible that time could pass him by. I've said I want someone with experience in this world of power conference basketball. At least being in the media, maybe Tom knows the ins and outs of it. He's hearing it from all of his coach buddies and everything. But I think at the end of the day, people think of Tom Crean as a little bit of a joke. He made funny faces on the sideline. He's brothers-in-law with the Harbaughs. But he can coach, and I think he does a really good job. And I have no expectation that Boston College is going to hire Tom Crean. But if they did, I am going to go. I'm going to do backflips and shout at everyone that this is a great idea, and I can't wait to see what happens. And also, even if it doesn't work out, he makes funny faces and he's brother-in-law with the Harbaughs, and like it's very silly and fun. And that's at least better than just like hiring, I don't know, one of these mid-major coaches that isn't that good and flames out. So like at the very least, if we're gonna watch something, let's not watch something fun. But I believe in him too.
We get the memes out of it, right?
That's right. Oh,
All right.
The Crean memes go off the charts.
All right, Shane. We're talking 3 weeks from now when the portal opens. Who's going to be the head coach of Boston College? Who's your prediction?
I've talked myself into Tony Skinn a little bit. Honestly, I think the worst thing that could happen for his candidacy at BC is that they win the A10 and he goes and wins a first round game and goes even further, because then all of a sudden people are going to start calling him from other schools. If George Mason makes it to the tournament and gets blown out in the first round or is left out for some reason or whatever, I think he'd be the BC coach within 48 hours. That's my hope. I've started to lean there. I named 18 candidates in my article, I think. And as I said, people have mentioned more to me. There's probably 20, 25 names that I'd be pretty solid with. To me, the problem is that Earl Grant and Jim Christian were both such curveballs. I know we're dealing with a different athletic director, different leadership. I just really hope we're not seeing another curveball, because I would be happy with 10 or 15 different guys. I just don't want to see a curveball where it's like, what, him? Like now? That's the one. Yeah.
Covering this for so long, like the last two coaches, I think I probably had the same reaction. Like when Earl Grant got hired, I did a show every day before that with like a different candidate. And when it was Earl Grant, I was like, who? He was just not anyone. And same thing with Jim Christian. It just was like completely out. And now Steve Donahue was a completely different story, because he was right off of a Sweet 16, and like everyone knew who he was. And I think people were pretty excited when he came in. But yeah, you've got me now thinking more about Tony Skinn. So I'm feeling this. So Shane, where can people find your work?
Yeah, I write for the Action Network. We're doing gambling previews for the NCAA tournament, whether you gamble or not, because to me, the gambling people know the ins, outs, fronts, backs of every team that they cover. So actionnetwork.com, you'll see a ton of my work there, game previews, injury updates, all kinds of stuff like that. And then I have my own website, palestraback.com. Little more infrequently there, but if I'm going to write about BC, if someone's going to let me write 3,000 words about the BC coaching search, it's myself. So that's my website. If you want to follow along, I'm on Blue Sky on the Shane train.
All right. And you can find his article. I'll put it in the show notes so you can read it too, because it's well worth your read. Shane, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Again, I will have I'm going to have Mike Sidley, who was at practice for football. He's going to come in and talk about what he saw the first practice of the season. We have a whole bunch going on. Check us out on all the socials, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.